Hi, so this is the start of my series on body positivity, and I have a number of topics that have come up for me around the changes that happen with lumpectomy and mastectomy, especially mastectomy, and the resulting view of ourselves, whether it be disdain or a sense of body positivity and self-love. And so I want to kind of approach it from a number of different perspectives, and today is the first perspective that I want to approach it from. Just recently, I was listening to one of my favorite breast cancer podcasts. It's hosted by Liz O'Riordan. I think that's how you say her name. She's from England, and it's spelled differently than it sounds, so hopefully I didn't butcher it. But she was interviewing a fellow surgeon. She was a breast surgeon. I think she's retired now, but she's a former breast surgeon, oncologist. So surgical oncologist is what we would say here in the U.S. for her role. So she's the one in the surgery operating room that is concerned about removing the cancer. But she was interviewing a plastic surgeon, so the one in the operating room that is not concerned with removing the cancer, but is concerned with leaving things looking as beautifully, aesthetically as possible and according to the patient's wishes. And it was a really interesting, candid conversation that I've never heard before, and I was really impressed with both of them in their candor, because I think it is a kind of a minefield, honestly, especially from my perspective as a flat advocate. I think they were treading on really sensitive ground, and yet really important things to talk about publicly as surgeons, and the conversation needs to happen more and more everywhere. But some of the things she said were like, whoa, I can't believe she just said that. And so I wanted to give some quotes and talk about my reaction to the quotes. The first thing about flat closure that came up in the podcast discussion was the idea that surgeons should be expected to offer every option to every patient. I have that belief myself at this point in history. I might change my mind about that after talking to more surgeons, but I definitely believe that that is the right thing to do. And almost all of my flat friends would share that passionately. And in fact, that's what we're working for as flat activists and flat advocates, is to get surgeons to be more fair and impartial in offering the full menu of opportunities and also side effects and possible repercussions in the very short time that they have, respectfully acknowledging that there is a very short time for that discussion. I think that it definitely needs to take more time. And personally, I believe it should be taking time outside of the hospital setting, in a very neutral setting, with a third party that is a consultant that is not going to benefit from any particular surgery. I personally feel that there is a massive conflict of interest on the part of any surgeon that is employed to do the surgery if they are also advising you on what surgery to do. That seems really obvious to me. I think it's pretty obvious from a legal perspective, but for whatever reason, we have this huge hole in our system where we're not allowed and encouraged to consult with a third party that is not biased or stand to benefit from that surgery that we're about to have. I think it's for the sake of expedience, and expedience is very important, but it's not as important as our right to choose and be fully informed. And so this is a very sticky topic. But the quote that I wanted to give from this plastic surgeon on that topic of why she doesn't offer every woman every possible surgery choice is this. She said, "It's important not to push reconstruction on someone who doesn't have a good relationship with their breasts." So that was the case in which she would offer a woman flat closure. That's what I took her to mean. That was one quote that really got me interested and my wheels turning, like, wow, okay. And then the second quote on the same topic was, "It's the surgeon's job to get to know the person, listen, and think for them." I was really astounded that she said that. I think she was being very candid and honest, that she thinks it's her job to think for us as the patient. And she said there's no point in offering a person every single operation under the sun. So she clearly disagrees with me and everything I just said about why it's really important to offer every, well, at least, reconstruction versus a flat outcome. And her caveat to that is, or her justification for not doing so would be that only those women who have a poor relationship with their breasts would possibly be offered a flat closure as a surgical option. She also mentioned in a different part of the conversation that there was something about maybe the schedule of picking children up from school being a factor and how athletically active a person is also being a factor. So she's putting us into these little silos of like, oh, if you're a marathon runner, maybe then I should mention to you that there's a really quick and easy way to get through this whole mastectomy experience if you just want to go flat. But the main point she made was that it's mostly women who don't have a good relationship with their breasts that want to go flat, which to me is, pretty upsetting, that statement. Again, I want to mostly give her credit for her candor and her willingness to even enter into this conversation. I'm not here to be critical of her. I think that these kinds of biases and assumptions on the part of surgeons is extremely common, and they are aware of how touchy they are, and that's why they don't give interviews such as this or even enter into these kinds of conversations where they might be challenged. But I want to talk about this and pick it apart a little bit because my experience has been very, very different than what this surgeon is expressing as kind of the status quo from a surgeon's professional perspective. I don't know. I mean, there's certainly a spectrum on which we all fall about how much we love our breasts or have a great relationship versus a negative relationship with our breasts. So there's a spectrum there. It's not black and white, and I don't think she was saying that it is. But I really wonder how she would expect to find out if someone has a good relationship with their breasts, because I never stopped to think personally about whether I had a good relationship with my breasts, and I honestly do not think it had anything to do with whether I like my physique now, whether I liked my breasts a lot before mastectomy or whether I didn't like my breasts at all before mastectomy. I think there were moments when I had each kind of feeling. So for me, there was a lot of mixture. But I don't think that any of that has anything to do with whether I like my body now. And I think that the biggest thing that I have that has influenced my perception of my body now is being around other flatties, and the fact that I chose to be flat and then chose to be around other flatties and learn from them how I can reframe and reimagine my relationship with my body. And that has nothing to do with a surgery or my surgical outcome. It has to do with my mindset and my willingness to be open and learn a new way. And breast cancer is requiring us to do that even if we have implants. We have a new body regardless. And I think that the falsehood that stands in the middle of all this is this belief on the part of surgeons in general that implants and false breasts, like things inside of our skin, is going to make us feel good about our physique, which I just can't even imagine. To me, I don't see any difference between having a prosthetic sitting on the outside of my flat chest and a fake silicone implant sitting on the inside. Neither one is my breast. Neither one is a breast. Neither one feels good or right or honest. And that has nothing to do with how much I run marathons or how many kids I have to pick up from school or whether I've been abused in the past and maybe don't like the shape or size of my breast. It has to do with the fact that I had my breasts removed, which all of us have done if we've had a mastectomy. And so I think it's a lot deeper than what plastic surgeons are trained to think it is. And I think that the outcome can be very much formed by what the plastic surgeons tell us the outcome should be. So we can try to talk ourselves into liking the outcome regardless, or fool ourselves into maybe telling others that we like the outcome because that's what we're supposed to do. But no matter what we have done with our body after mastectomy, chances are we don't like the outcome at first, and then we have to learn to love our new body after that, if we're willing to, and if we have an invitation to, and if we're willing to engage socially with other women who've been through the same thing. And so I really think this is an important topic to discuss in the breast cancer community. I think that it's important to set new precedents and new norms. And it is really tragic to me that in many of the decades leading up to this one, we have not had the freedom socially and societally to have these kind of conversations at all. It's all been very secretive and hush-hush in former generations. And the really exciting thing is that in this generation, it is not. It is wide open. It's being discussed frankly on social media everywhere, especially I think on Instagram, but also in Facebook groups that are safe and somewhat private. There's also a lot of abuse happening in Facebook groups. There's a lot of putting down of these kinds of ideas, depending on which Facebook group you're in and how, siloed you are in your social interactions. But the cool thing is the younger generations now are not willing to shut up and keep these things swept under the rug. And so we're learning. We're learning together, and we're learning that it doesn't have to be what our surgeon told us it's going to be. That having a nice round shaped breast is going to make up for all of the trauma of multiple surgeries and the fact that we're covered with scars still and that we don't have breast tissue under our skin. And I do believe that some women convince themselves that their implants are just as beautiful as their natural breasts were. And that's great if they can do so, because I think that's what they need to work on doing once they have implants. But I also think that it's great and very commendable for a flat person to work on believing that their body is beautiful in spite of the fact that they have no roundness and no shape, and that they lost something that once was there, and that's okay. So, this is a tough one, and I expect to get a lot of backlash. I'm stepping on some toes here, as that surgeon stepped on my toes a bit. But I think it's so important, even in spite of backlash, to have this discussion and to acknowledge that the truth is a lot of us are flat, and actually Liz O'Riordan is one of them who, is pretty unabashedly admitting that she likes the idea of flatness and she likes the idea of symmetry, even though her country doesn't allow for the medical provision of symmetry in the instance when you have breast cancer in one breast and not the other. In many cases, women aren't even allowed a second mastectomy. And I think she pretty assertively stated that she doesn't think that that's right in this very discussion that I'm talking about. And I'm so very grateful for that and for her input into that discussion. I want to talk about one other quote that really stung. What I took her to mean is that it would be really nice if society allowed us as women to make decisions based on what we feel or what we think about our body, and not what society feels and thinks about our body. And in my world, that has already been crumbling. She's probably not on these Instagram groups and movements that I'm on, where I'm seeing that we are recreating what society is for us, and we're changing what's okay and what's not okay. And it's not for everyone. Certainly some people are really frightened by the idea of flatness after mastectomy, and they will always be for whatever reason. But society is not a living, breathing entity that makes decisions and creates social movements. Society is what we make of it. It is us. So if we are spreading the word that I can really love my body after mastectomy without implants, then that is what becomes true in society. We're not victims of society. We're not just following along with this thing called society. We create it. We move it. We change it. And we are changing it. And I know that social media operates in bubbles, in pockets, and those pockets and bubbles are hidden from the general public discourse. But, we also have things like the Dove commercials where flat women are being celebrated in commercial culture. So it's not completely hidden from the society at large either. And certainly we are educating each other as women prior to mastectomy in that window of time that women have after talking to their surgeon or not talking to their surgeon about all their options. We come to each other and we have access to each other now, and we are educating each other, and we are shifting the public mindset and conception of body positivity and body change in a powerful way that this surgeon appears not to be aware of. And that's fine. It's not her job to be aware of that, maybe. But let me just read that again, because it's just, the wording of it is really astounding and impacting. And I just think it's worth thinking about. She said, until society allows women to make decisions based on what they feel about their body, and not what they think society wants their body to be. Right now, she's saying society doesn't allow us to make decisions based on what we think and feel about our bodies. We have to make decisions based on what society thinks and feels. That's a better way of phrasing it. And I wholeheartedly disagree, and society is so much more diverse than I think what she's limiting it to. So my society says that my body is beautiful as a flat woman and an asymmetrical woman who has a ton of concavity on this side and a little bit of extra skin that makes a half of a breast on this side. My society is what I make, is the people that I choose to surround myself with, both online and in person. That's my society. That's the only thing I need to care about. I think maybe there's this view in Europe that fashion and the public perception of the fashion norm of the moment or the trend of the moment is the only thing that matters when it comes to our bodies. If that's true, then half of us would be hiding and ashamed of our bodies as they were when we were born naturally. Half of us don't have the ideal fashion body of the moment, whether that's big breasts or small breasts, depending on the trend of the moment. Most of us don't have whatever is trending in our bodies. So I guess as a plastic surgeon, maybe there's this bubble also that says we have to follow those trends as much as we can and try to press our breastage in and pretend that we're flat on those days that society and fashion says that flatness is cool, and then boost them up on the days that big breastedness is cool. I think that's absolutely and utterly ridiculous, and it doesn't exist in my world. So I just have to challenge that. I think we can create belief systems around these things for ourselves and not be enslaved to some semblance of trends being the end all when it comes to the shape of our bodies. And I'm so glad to be able to say that. Not that I didn't have a transition period, but my transition period to start to love and accept my body and be proud of it didn't take that long after my first mastectomy. It was all a matter of finding people, both online and in person, who could show me how they've developed a love for themselves in spite of mastectomy and flatness. So yeah, I just really want to put down that idea that anyone could be or should be or must be limited to what the general population thinks is true about their bodies. It's not about what someone else thinks is true. And what I've seen over and over and over in other people's lives, not just mine, is it is completely about what we can get around and start to believe about ourselves as being true. That is the truth when it comes to these very personal, self-image oriented beliefs. There is no other truth because it is absolutely personal. As this woman said, you have to get to know the person, listen, and understand how much athletic competition is an issue, how much picking up their kid from school is an issue, how much they've been abused or dislike their body because of abuse. We also have to imagine that they are very capable of reforming their opinion completely. Maybe what you need to do is find out how adaptable that patient is to a new situation. I think most of us are extremely adaptable, and maybe that would be bad news for her because that would maybe put her out of business. But I think that it can even get to the point where a plastic surgeon can be the educator about what's possible instead of trying to condemn us all to needing to recreate what we already knew ourselves to be before mastectomy. And I think if the plastic surgeons can't do that, that's okay, because we breast cancer survivors can. I can get on the Facebook groups and post photos of my new body and show it off in a way that is proud and curious and surprised at how much I am able to love it and appreciate it, in some ways even more than I did before mastectomy when I had large breasts. To point out the benefits of the change, I think all of us have the ability to adapt to what we choose to adapt to. And the likelihood is that if our best friend in the world has gone through breast cancer already, and our best friend in the world had implants put in after mastectomy, then that's what we're going to do, because that's what we're familiar with, and that's totally fine. But I think because we have access to more and more and more bodies and faces in that window prior to mastectomy, we have this amazing opportunity to learn from strangers what has become their new norm and what has become beautiful to them in ways that they weren't expecting. I think the power of a testimony around these things is so impactful and is so powerful. And in the end, we all have the ability to love what we're left with anyway, if we can just find the right community of people who loves their bodies. So if you end up with an implant because you never got offered flat closure and nobody ever told you how freeing and wonderful flat closure can be, and that it's possible to love your body after flat closure, you can find the implant community and learn to love your body after implant. And I mean, it's all available, and it's all, gonna have its ups and downs and its transition and its growing periods that are painful, maybe. But at the same time, there's so much potential for self-love and self-acceptance too. And it makes me so glad for all the ugliness of social media. This one really beautiful thing has come from it in my life, and it makes all the difference. And I'm just celebrating it today. So I thank the podcast guest that came on and was willing to let her words be heard and maybe critiqued and judged a little bit here. But just for starting that conversation, because it's such an important conversation to have. And these conversations need to happen so much more between us, former patients, and our surgeons if we can get access to them. That's kind of what I'm left with after talking about this and thinking about it for a number of days. I just really hope that we can either write letters or send videos or have conversations with our former surgeons to educate them about how important it is to break down those biases and those preferences and those silos and prejudgments and thinking for us, which does not need to be done, in my humble opinion. So I'll leave it there for today. And thanks for listening to my soapbox. And if I triggered you at all, I am deeply, deeply sorry. I know this is super sensitive stuff. And all of the videos in this series on body positivity will be sensitive, but hopefully they will also be very affirming and hope-producing in your life. And I hope to see you in the next one soon. Bye-bye.